America a fost atacată de teroriștii coordonați din Afganistan pe 11 septembrie 2001. Statele Unite au reacționat rapid și au invadat țara care îl proteja pe Osama bin Laden, creierul din spatele atacurilor. Sunt 20 de ani de atunci și, între timp, cel mai lung război din istoria Americii s-a încheiat. Acum trăim momentul bilanțului, care este predominat de erori și greșeli politice discutabile. Generalul Ben Hodges a fost comandantul trupelor SUA din Europa și face acum o analiză a faptelor trecute, dar și a pașilor pe care americanii urmează să-i facă în relația cu talibanii. Sunt Cristina Cileacu, începe Pașaport diplomatic. General Ben Hodges, former Commander General of United States Army Europe, welcome to Diplomatic Passport.
Cristina, thank you for the privilege.
La ora 8:46, în dimineața de 11 septembrie 2001, un avion Boeing al American Airlines a intrat în turnul nordic al World Trade Center din New York. 18 minute mai târziu, un alt Boeing, de data aceasta al companiei United Airlines, a lovit turnul sudic. America și întreaga lume priveau înmărmurite imaginile a ceea ce s-a dovedit a fi un atac terorist de proporții nemai văzute. 15 minute au mai rezistat cele două turnuri gemene până s-au făcut una cu pământul. Într-o oră de la primul atac, un al treilea avion se prăbușea intenționat peste o latură a clădirii Pentagonului, sediul Departamentului de Apărare al SUA. Un al patrulea avion a fost deturnat în același scop. Cei de la bord știau deja despre atacuri, au realizat ce se întâmplă și au decis să se lupte cu teroriștii. Știu că vom muri cu toții, dar vom face ceva în privința asta. Te iubesc, draga mea, a spus Thomas Burnett Jr., unul dintre pasagerii pregătiți să lupte cu atacatorii. Sandy Bradshaw, una dintre însoțitoarele de bord, și-a sunat soțul și a explicat că pregătește sticle cu apă clocotită pentru a le putea folosi împotriva teroriștilor din cabina de pilotaj. Pasagerii și personalul aviatic s-au luptat cu pirații aerului, dar avionul a căzut cu peste 800 de km pe oră pe un câmp din Pennsylvania. 2977 de oameni au murit în acest atac terorist. Ce a urmat după ziua care a schimbat lumea are efecte și în prezent.
General, President Biden had a declaration defending his decision to end the Afghanistan war, saying that it was the time to end this war. Do you think it was a correct decision?
Well, I think given all the circumstances, it was the right decision. We had two or three fatal flaws, I think, in our approach over the last 20 years that if we didn't fix those problems, then we were never going to achieve the final success that we wanted. And I'm talking about Pakistan, the design of the Afghan security forces, getting back to what our original goal was. These were things that I think made it impossible for us to achieve the ultimate outcome we had all hoped for. And so it made no sense to just keep sending young women and men down there, as well as the financial resources. So I agree with the President's decision. There are certain parts of it, of this whole process, that I think deserve criticism, but I agree with his decision.
Okay, so General, what went wrong? Because, okay, the decision was correct, but we witnessed all the chaos of American and allies withdraw from Afghanistan. So what was that?
Well, if we assume that this was going to have to end, and I think everybody knew it was going to come to an end. I mean, President Obama had talked about it, President Trump had talked about it. The decision by the Trump administration to make an agreement with the Taliban without the Afghan government being a part of it, and I think without consultation with all of our allies, including Romania, that started the clock to a departure that the Taliban understood. And they knew that when the United States left, when Romania left, when the UK left, and Germany and so on, all of the assets would go with them as well. So then it was just a matter of time. And so ever since then, the Taliban went to the Afghan commanders in all the provinces and said, look, the Americans and the Allies are going to be gone come this summer of 2021. You can either surrender or we're going to kill you and your family when we get there. And that explains, I think, the amazing rapid collapse of Afghan security forces because of that. So you can't blame President Biden or just President Trump or Obama or whatever. Each administration bears some responsibility for how we ended up here.
President Trump did this agreement with the Taliban, but on the other hand, it was quite a period since then. And in the meantime, I can only assume that the intelligence services made a lot of scenarios because, of course, intelligence work is not an exact science. So how come nobody was ready for any of these scenarios?
Yeah, that is a terrific question. For which I don't know the full answer. I think that many of us, including me, by the way, I mean, I'm part of the problem also. When I was in Afghanistan in 2009 and 10, and when I worked on Pakistan and Afghanistan issues in the Pentagon in 2011, I believed that this could work. But what I failed to appreciate, and what others failed to appreciate, was that the whole model of Afghan security forces was built on a Western model, like the Romanian armed forces, the U.S. armed forces, the German armed forces, that depends on overwhelming firepower, endless logistics, exquisite intelligence capabilities. And so when we left, then the whole thing collapses. That was a design flaw. But there also was so much corruption at the upper levels of government and even within the military, where soldiers were not getting their rations, they were not being supported properly, they were left on outposts. And so I think people that gave different opinions or assessments that were contrary to the administration narrative, that was suppressed. And so we either refused to believe or couldn't believe that after all this money and all this time, that it would collapse so fast. So yes, we should have anticipated it. Obviously, we didn't, including me.
General, of course, this army of Afghanistan, which was trained by United States and the Allies, was blamed as well for not fighting with Taliban. On the other hand, inside of this exact army, I'm pretty sure there are soldiers that wanted to fight with the Taliban regime. So why didn't they?
Yeah, a terrific question, Christina. Soldiers from any country have to believe in what they're fighting for, whether it's to defend their home, their family, or their nation, or in many cultures, their tribe. But they have to have confidence that their leaders are with them. They have to have confidence that their leaders are going to make sure that they are taken care of. Food, salary, medical care if they get injured. So many of these things were absent in much of the Afghan security forces. So you're right, there were thousands of Afghan soldiers that were ready to fight. I mean, this is not about courage, in my view. I saw very good, exactly. I saw very effective Afghan combat operations in Kandahar and in Helmand province and in Zabul. But they were always integrated with us, where they had all these other things. But then you think, well, wait a minute. The Taliban do not have an air force. The Taliban do not have satellites. The Taliban do not have all these things. Why were they so effective? And I think it's because their design, their organization, is more in harmony with Afghan culture and Afghan society. And we tried to build a model that was different from that. And I think that's part of the reason it collapsed.
We are looking now at Taliban dressed in American uniforms as well, filming themselves in American planes, American helicopters, using American equipment and so on. What is this image for United States Army?
Well, of course, these pictures are hard to look at. They're very frustrating. And when you think about how many thousands of Americans and Romanians and Brits and Germans were killed and wounded, but also how many thousands of Afghan soldiers were killed, the devastation to Afghan society over the past decades. So that's hard to watch. But this is not just a reflection on the U.S. Army. This is a reflection on U.S. policy and on a failed strategy. Look, I knew that we all knew that we would see, when it came to this, there would be this sort of a celebration. And these images will stick around for a long time, just like the last images of the war in Vietnam. So that's part of it. But what really matters is that, number one, we continue to try and get people out using diplomatic means that want to get out. Number two, we reassess our strategy for the region and determine what are our interests for the West in the region that we need to protect, and how can we use diplomacy and economic tools and maybe even third-party countries such as Turkey or Qatar to help achieve those strategic interests.
Well, President Biden also said that right now it's time as well to stop trying to form states with the help of the military. Do you think United States will ever engage in something like as big as Afghanistan?
No, I'm sure that's a possibility somewhere, sometime. I mean, the world keeps turning, and we will continue to have interest. I think what I heard the president say, and with which I agree, by the way, it's important that the civilian leadership, our elected leaders, they have to identify the strategic objective, and then they have to set the priorities, and they have to say, we're going to use diplomacy with military and support, or we're going to use more economic tools, financial pressure to dry up finances for the terrorists, for example. It's all of these things together. It should never be military or diplomacy. It's working in concert. And by the way, it's got to be done with allies. The United States does not have the capacity to do this alone.
Well, since you mentioned diplomacy, of course, United States and the Taliban are talking right now, especially for what you said earlier, to get out American citizens that are still in Afghanistan and Afghans that are cleared to exit and to go to United States. The question is, in your opinion, since you worked in Afghanistan and you kind of know the society, how will United States and the Taliban regime will work further on?
This will be a challenge, of course, because there's a lot of emotion involved right now. And also, unfortunately, in the United States, there is a lot of negative political debate going on where, one side is blaming President Biden, the other side is blaming President Trump. And this is not something that I'm proud of, but it's unfortunately it's a fact. And so we're going to have to get through that. And the administration has the responsibility to figure out what can we do. And I hope that they'll get strong support from the Congress, as well as strong support by working with allies, not pulling allies along, but working with allies that also have an interest in stability and security in the region and in reducing the number of refugees that are coming towards Europe, for example. Now, we worked with, when you think about the United States after the Second World War, of course we had to work with Germany and with Japan immediately after the war. So, and then in Vietnam, today Vietnam is one of our most important partners in the Indo-Pacific region. Vice President Harris was just there this week.
Yeah.
So this is all doable. We have to know. We have to think through what is it we want to achieve, and then hopefully allies like Turkey or countries like Qatar can help be an intermediary, perhaps.
Of course, Afghanistan is a big possibility of watching a terrorist group evolving and empowering themselves against the Taliban regime, first of all, and secondly, against the rest of the world. The question is, because the war on terror will continue for sure in a different way, how much will the neighbors of Afghanistan, and I'm talking about China, Pakistan and Iran, will get involved in this fight against terror?
Well, what a great question. And you're right. People will continue to use terror as a means, as they have done for centuries. So this is not going away. But how can we counter it other than just killing terrorists? You know, you have to address the root cause. Why do young women and men join organizations that export terror? Where does their money come from? And I think we know that a lot of the money passes through banks in friendly nations, maybe even in some ways in the United States. So if we're serious about countering terrorism, we're going to have to take a good hard look at the finances and stopping that, which will come with trade-offs as well. Pakistan, one of the mistakes that I made, I believed that Pakistan was an ally. I believed that they were going to help us. I was completely wrong. I deluded myself, as did many other people in the government. Pakistan offered safe haven to the Taliban. ISI, which is the intelligence arm of Pakistan, used Taliban as one of its assets because Pakistan does not want to have a strong, stable Afghanistan that is friendly to India in its west, while it's got India to its east. And now Pakistan is having to deal with the results of their unhelpful policy. I think China, of course, which, as you know, shares a small border with Afghanistan, is concerned about Islamic extremism because of their own issues with the Uyghurs there. But they will most likely, I think, be willing to pay a lot of money to Afghanistan for access to extract mineral resources and for protection. The Kremlin obviously is happy to see the United States and Western allies humiliated like this, but they are also very worried now that Islamic extremism grows up through Central Asia.
Right now there are 18 known terrorist organizations acting inside Afghanistan from 72 known terrorist organizations in the world. What shall the rest of the world expect from this?
Well, that's an interesting statistic, and what the rest of the world should be thinking about is these terrorists are not going to go just after the United States. They're going to come after Europe. They're going to come after other governments in the Middle East. And so most other nations of the world have an interest in making sure that Afghanistan does not become a safe haven again for terrorism. And so we're going to have to come up with solutions using diplomacy, economic tools, not just military tools, to contain that. And again, that means you have to have a regional view. Afghanistan is not an island out in the ocean somewhere. It has an Iranian neighbor, it has a neighbor in Pakistan, it has Tajikistan, it has China. So I think Turkey can play a very important role here, and which is another reason why it's important that we repair our relationship with our Turkish allies.
I will return to Pakistan, to what you said about ISI, the Interintelligence Service of Pakistan. They are saying right now that they don't have enough influence over the Taliban. But on the other hand, even if they don't or they do, the Taliban are also challenged by other terrorist organizations. So is Pakistan able to negotiate with all of them? What's your opinion on that?
Of course, as you know, the territory of Western Pakistan is so difficult.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge that the military of Pakistan was unable to completely eradicate Taliban and other type organizations in the Northwest territory because it is so difficult to move there. The tribes, I mean, it's that kind of a culture. So there is a challenge. But I think that because the Taliban in Afghanistan need international recognition, they need financial support, they need access. It's a landlocked country. If they want to export anything, for example, it's got to go out through Iran or through Pakistan. And so I think the potential is there that Pakistan can influence what goes on there, but they'll be concerned about, again, having a country friendly to India on their western border and India on the eastern border. So that's why India has to be part of whatever this new strategic analysis is.
General Ben Hodges, thank you so much for this interview.
Cristina, you have such an important job. Thank you for giving me an opportunity.
Atât pentru astăzi, dar rămânem în continuare online pe pagina de Facebook a emisiunii și pe contul nostru de Twitter. Revenim cu subiecte noi din lumea diplomației și a politicii externe, vinerea viitoare de la 11:30 și reluare sâmbătă de la 22:30. La revedere!